If you're watching this video, I assume you made it to the fantasy playoffs, so congratulations and great job getting through what has been a tumultuous and unpredictable 14 weeks. Fortunately, there are no NFL teams on bye this week, but there is still plenty of injuries and matchups to get through as you prepare your lineups for the first round. I'm Jorden Hill, and I'm here to help you set those winning fantasy lineups as we take a look at RotoBaller's consensus half PPR rankings for Saturday, Sunday, and Monday's games. We'll get right into it, but first, drop a like on the video and leave a comment down below with any start-sit dilemmas you're facing. Let's kick things off at the quarterback position with number 12, Tua Tagovailoa. Tagovailoa remains a top 12 play for us this week simply due to the explosiveness of Miami's offense, but Tua hasn't been all that great over the second half of the season. He faces the division rival Jets this week, and New York has surrendered the second fewest fantasy points to quarterbacks this year. The Dolphins just played the Jets 3 weeks ago, and Tua had 2 interceptions and a really underwhelming performance. Miami will be at home this week, and I'm sure Tyreek Hill will push to play through his ankle injury, but the thought of Tagovailoa with Hill at less than 100% against this defense isn't very enticing. Moving up to number 9, we have Jordan Love. Love was on a tear from weeks 11 through 13, but regressed in primetime against the Giants last week. Luckily for him, the Packers get to take on the Buccaneers at home on Sunday. This is a perfect matchup for Love, as Tampa Bay's defense excels against the run, but has given up the second most passing yards to QBs this year. It seems unlikely that Christian Watson suits up this week, but rookies Tucker Kraft and Jaden Reed are emerging and should be solid starts in this contest as well. Coming in at number 6, we have Matthew Stafford. The veteran wasn't doing much for fantasy purposes early on in the season, but he's really turned things on as of late. Since week 12, only Trevor Lawrence and Dak Prescott have scored more fantasy points, and Stafford faced the Ravens and Browns during that 3-game stretch, 2 of the most difficult possible opponents in the league. He'll get a well-deserved plus matchup this week against the Washington Commanders, who give up the most points in the NFL and the second most fantasy points to quarterbacks. Given how well Stafford has been playing and how poorly the Commanders have been defending, all Rams weapons should be in starting lineups. Now onto our running back rankings. At number 9 is Joe Mixon. Rookie Chase Brown looked electric last week, but Mixon is still getting a ton of opportunities in this Bengals offense with nearly 50 total touches over the past 2 weeks. Quarterback Jake Browning has been solid, but Cincinnati will face a true test this week against the Minnesota Vikings. Minnesota is only giving up about 19 points per game, and running backs are struggling to produce on the Vikings as they've surrendered the 4th fewest fantasy points to the position. Don't expect massive numbers from Mixon, but given how involved he's been, especially in the passing game, he should stay locked into your lineup. There have been moments this season in which fantasy managers panicked about Derrick Henry, who did disappoint in a few showings, but is the RB4 on the season and our RB6 on the week. He's found the end zone twice in each of his past 3 games, and will look to continue the trend against the Houston Texans. The Texans have been a middle-of-the-pack matchup for running backs, so while this isn't the same run defense that it was in years past, we can't ignore King Henry's history against Houston. In 4 of his last 5 meetings with the Texans, Henry surpassed 200 rushing yards and 2 touchdowns. And at number 4, we have Alvin Kamara. Although he scored in Week 14, it would be fair to label Kamara's performance against the Panthers as underwhelming. He'll have a nice shot to redeem himself on Sunday, though, against the New York Giants. The Giants have surrendered the 7th most fantasy points to running backs and the 5th most rushing touchdowns. The Saints are banged up right now, and even though Taysom Hill and Rashid Shaheed are trending in the right direction, New Orleans will definitely be without Michael Thomas, and Chris Olave's ankle injury has held him out of practice this week. Kamara should see plenty of carries and targets to give him a nice floor and a high ceiling. Starting off our wide receivers is number 9, DK Metcalf. Metcalf has had somewhat of an up-and-down campaign, but he exploded for 134 yards and 3 touchdowns against the Cowboys in Week 13. He only had 2 receptions last week, but one of them was a 31-yard touchdown from Drew Lock. Geno Smith returned to a limited practice on Thursday and appears to be on track for Monday night's showdown with the Eagles. Even if Smith is ruled out, though, Metcalf should be able to get it done with Locke against a Philly defense that is getting destroyed by the pass and has surrendered the most fantasy points to wide receivers this season. Given his ADP coming into the season, I don't think many people expected Michael Pittman to become a top 12 fantasy wideout, but here we are, and he comes in at number 7. Pittman has been super reliable as the favorite target of Gardner Minshew, and he's played his way into must-start every week territory. The Colts will face the Steelers this week, and although Pittsburgh has been stout against receivers recently, this isn't all that surprising when you look at the teams they've played. This defense made Bailey Zappi look good in Week 14, so you should continue to have full confidence in Pittman on Saturday. Up at number 3 is Amon-Ra St. Brown, who was one of the most consistent players in fantasy during the middle portion of the season, but he's been quiet over the past 2 weeks as he's hauled in just 5 of his 14 targets for 70 yards since Week 13. Fortunately, one of these receptions was a touchdown, but his output has nonetheless been disappointing. The Sun God has a really difficult matchup against the Denver Broncos, who rank 6th against wide receivers this season. However, the Lions returned to Detroit for the first time in 3 weeks on Saturday night, and it's been well documented that Jared Goff performs much better at home than on the road. There should be a lot of points scored in this game, so don't lose hope in an elite player like St. Brown. We'll wrap things up at tight end, and at number 10 is Dalton Kincaid. Kincaid has been limited in practice this week, but should be good to go against the Cowboys. He didn't do much in Week 14 with the return of Dawson Knox, but he still earned 8 targets against the Chiefs, who have been stingy against tight ends all season. Despite its strong defense, Dallas isn't a horrible matchup for tight ends, and this contest is projected for 50 total points. As long as he's active, Kincaid is a solid option. Coming in at 7 is Evan Ingram. Ingram hadn't found the end zone at all through Week 12, but he's been a frequent visitor ever since. He went off for 11 catches, 95 yards, and 2 touchdowns against a formidable Browns defense last week. He'll have another challenge this week against the Ravens, who have allowed the 9th fewest fantasy points to tight ends. Still, it seems that Ingram is the biggest beneficiary of Christian Kirk being sidelined, so he should still see plenty of opportunities and remains a quality start. And finally, at number 2 is TJ Hawkinson. Hawkinson has 3 straight games, hovering around 5 receptions for 50 yards, and just 1 touchdown during that span. We don't really know what to expect with Nick Mullins at quarterback this week, but we do know that Hawkinson is in a spot to smash against the Cincinnati Bengals. The Bengals give up the most fantasy points to tight ends, so even if Justin Jefferson is good to go, Hawkinson will get his looks and should be able to find success. Hope you guys enjoyed. Please remember to subscribe to RotoBaller for more fantasy football playoff content that'll help you win big in 2023. Thanks so much for tuning in, and best of luck in your Week 15 fantasy matchups.